Three American presidents share something nobody talks about. Their ancestors, their direct blood relatives, were hanged for crimes they didn't commit. Not theft, not murder. Witchcraft. In Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, 19 people were executed for being witches. None of them were, and at least 3 future presidents carry their blood. William Howard Taft, the 27th president, carries a direct bloodline to a man who stood among the oldest victims of the Salem witch trials, George Jacobs Sr. The genealogical record is unbroken. Taft is Jacobs's 6th great-grandson, a connection documented through birth, marriage, and probate records reaching from colonial Massachusetts to Ohio and Indiana. The chain begins with George Jacobs Sr., born in London around 1609, who settled in Salem Village and purchased land in 1658. His family's name appears again and again in the town books, weaving through generations until it arrives at Taft's father, Alfonso, in the 19th century. In August 1692, George Jacobs Sr. was 83 years old. He relied on 2 canes and was described by neighbors as tall, white-haired, and frail. That summer, he was accused of witchcraft by his own granddaughter, Margaret Jacobs, swept up in the panic that gripped Salem. The court charged him with acts he insisted he had never committed. On August 19, 1692, he was led to the gallows. Contemporary accounts record his final words to the judges. "You tax me for a wizard, you may as well tax me for a buzzard." He declared, "I am falsely accused. I never did it." Margaret, only 17, recanted her testimony the very next day. In a letter later submitted to the magistrates, she wrote, "What I said was altogether false against my grandfather. I was in such horror of conscience that I could not sleep." Her recantation reached the court on January 3, 1693, months too late to save him. The tragedy left an indelible mark, not only on the Jacobs family, but on the generations that followed. The blood of a wrongfully executed man flowed, centuries later, into the veins of a president. Chester A. Arthur's family story reaches back to the small, wind-battered town of Salisbury, Massachusetts, where Susanna North Martin was born in 1621. Parish registers from Salisbury confirm her marriage to George Martin in 1646, and the Martin line weaves steadily through the centuries: John Martin, Elizabeth Martin, Abigail Bancroft, until it arrives at Arthur's father, William, in the early 19th century. The records are clear, the chain unbroken. Arthur is Martin's 5th great-grandson. Long before the Salem hysteria, Susanna Martin's name had already been whispered in connection with witchcraft. In 1669, and again in 1671, neighbors accused her of sorcery, blaming her for unexplained sickness and spoiled butter. Both times, local councils dismissed the charges after hearing from community members who vouched for her character. Still, the suspicion lingered. Decades later, as the witch panic swept through Essex County, Martin's old reputation made her an easy target. In the summer of 1692, at age 71, Susanna Martin was brought before the Salem court. The record of her examination survives. When pressed by the magistrates, she answered plainly, "I have no hand in witchcraft." Her defiance did not sway the court. On July 19, 1692, she was hanged alongside 4 others. No evidence, only fear and accusation sealed her fate. Her steadfast denial, repeated even as the noose was prepared, stands as a testament to her innocence and to the failure of a system that demanded confession over truth. The Martin family, marked by loss, carried the memory of that injustice through each generation until it reached the White House itself. George W. Bush's ancestral line reaches back to a woman whose story stands apart for its bitter tangle of mistaken identity and bureaucratic disregard. Mary Parker, born around 1637, was a widow living in Andover when the witch panic swept through Essex County. The genealogical trail, preserved in church registers and probate records, moves through her son John, her grandson Samuel, and then through a succession of Parkers and Thayers, each generation leaving its mark in town books from Andover to Maine and finally into the Bush family line. Each link is documented, births, marriages, land transfers, until it arrives centuries later at George H.W. Bush and his son, the 43rd president. Mary Parker's ordeal began in September 1692. Accused of witchcraft, she stood before the magistrates and pleaded her case with a clarity that still echoes from the court records. There is another Mary Parker in Andover. Her defense was simple. She insisted the authorities had the wrong woman. The judges, pressed by the mounting hysteria and eager for convictions, dismissed her plea. Within days, Mary was condemned. On September 22, 1692, at age 55, she was hanged on Gallows Hill alongside 7 others. The punishment did not end with her death. Colonial law permitted the seizure of property from those convicted of witchcraft. Less than a month after the execution, Mary's sons, Samuel and Thomas, filed a formal petition with the Essex County Court. The document, dated October 15, 1692, states, "We, the humble offspring of the late Mary Parker, do hereby petition this court for the return of our father's lands, which were taken without cause for the alleged crime of witchcraft which our mother never committed." Their request was ignored. The estate remained in the hands of colonial officials, and the Parker family was left dispossessed, their loss compounded by the failure of the system to recognize innocence, even after death. In the autumn of 1711, nearly 20 years after the executions at Salem, the Massachusetts colonial legislature took up a matter that had haunted the province. Lawmakers drafted an act to reverse the attainders of George Burroughs and others for witchcraft. The document named the dead, George Jacobs Sr., Susanna Martin, Mary Parker, and many more, declaring that their convictions were void. The act stated, in the careful language of the time, that the accused were restored to their good names and reputations, and their estates, rights, and liberties. The reversal offered no explanation for the original verdicts, only a formal undoing of the legal stain. For the families, it was a moment of official acknowledgement, though the dead could not be returned and property lost was rarely restored. The law's passage closed a legal chapter but left the deeper wound unhealed. Decades turned to centuries. The story of the trials became a cautionary tale, but the state's silence lingered. In 1957, the Massachusetts legislature assembled to confront the past once more. Lawmakers introduced a resolution apologizing for the witch prosecutions. The measure passed both chambers without dissent. The apology read, "The General Court of Massachusetts deeply regrets and apologizes for the events of 1692, in which persons were falsely accused, tried, and executed for the crime of witchcraft." The vote was unanimous, a rare moment of unity, acknowledging the injustice and the pain carried by descendants. Yet, even this gesture was incomplete. The apology did not erase the centuries of loss, nor did it fully restore the dignity taken from those condemned. Each step toward redress was slow, and each came long after the families had endured generations of silence. On October 31st, 2001, Acting Governor Jane Swift signed a proclamation that carried the weight of centuries. The document, solemn and direct, named each of the accused from 1692 and declared them innocent of all charges. For the first time, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts officially recognized that the executions were not justice, but tragedy. The proclamation called for public remembrance, urging citizens to reflect on the dangers of fear and false accusation. It was a gesture long overdue, arriving more than 300 years after the gallows at Salem had fallen silent. The ceremony itself was quiet, attended by descendants and state officials. Swift's signature joined a line of efforts to confront the past, not with vengeance, but with acknowledgement. The proclamation's language was clear. The accused were victims of mass hysteria, and the stain of their convictions was erased. Among the names was Susanna Martin, whose bloodline would one day reach the presidency. The document closed a chapter that had remained open in the hearts of many families, restoring a measure of dignity to those whose only crime was innocence. Yet the memory of that day in 1692 lingers. Reverend Nicholas Noyes, who watched the executions, delivered a sermon that echoed across generations. "What a sad thing it is to see 8 firebrands of hell hanging there," he said, his words branding the moment with a sense of finality and condemnation. The line survives in diaries and church records, a stark reminder of how easily fear can twist the meaning of justice. The proclamation could not undo the deaths, but it stood as an official admission. The accused were never witches. They were daughters, mothers, fathers, and sons, condemned by a system that mistook panic for proof. The reckoning, though late, was real, a public act of remembrance for lives lost and for the families who carried the weight of injustice into the highest halls of American power. Centuries later, power and legacy cannot erase the terror of a noose tightened by fear. When innocence fell to accusation, even the bloodlines of presidents bore that wound. Justice denied once still echoes now, reminding us that unchecked hysteria endangers every future, no matter how high the name.